I warned them for months. I showed maps, data reports, all the evidence a sane person could ever need, and they laughed at me. They built their dream homes on a fault line, and I stood there the morning the ground tore open, watching one of their crown jewels sink into the earth like a coffin swallowed whole. I moved back to Ridgefield because I thought I was done with chaos. After 30 years as a government geologist, I wanted peace. I bought a little ranch house at the base of Brushwood Ridge. The view was perfect, the silence even better. Most people didn't know or didn't care that the ridge sat right on top of one of the most unstable fault lines in the county. I knew it, though. I had studied it, drilled into it, listened to it, breathed. That ridge was alive and it was dangerous. But Ridgefield had changed. The HOA that used to be a bunch of neighbors organizing block parties was gone. In their place came a slick, ambitious board calling themselves the Ridgefield Renewal Committee. They weren't interested in safety or community. They were interested in property values, glossy brochures, luxury homes with infinity pools and glass walls. And leading the charge was Karen Lattimore, the queen bee of bad ideas. She had that smile sharp as a blade, the kind that made you feel small and dismissed in the same breath. I realized how far they'd gone one Tuesday morning. I looked up from my garden gloves and saw a yellow excavator parked near my fence. Surveyors' flags blueprints spread across the hood of an HOA-branded SUV. They didn't even bother hiding it. I walked over and asked what was going on. 13 executive homes, the man told me, Ridgefield Heights, right on the western ridge. I said, "Do you realize this is seismic ground?" He smirked. Called it a rumor. When I told him I'd spent 3 decades surveying fault lines, his face changed for half a second, but then he shrugged. "Take it up with the board." So I did. That night I pulled out my binders, my old hard drives, years of seismic data. It felt like dragging ghosts out of storage. The next day, I walked into the HOA board meeting, a room that reeked of lemon cleaner and self-importance, and I laid it all out. Maps, overlays, GPS readings. Karen didn't even look at them. She smiled, thinly said the land had passed a basic soil inspection, and told me if I kept disrupting meetings I'd face fines under the Community Interference Clause. I left the room to the sound of her gavel tapping like a warning shot. They thought they could ignore me, and for a while they did. The bulldozers moved in. Trees were torn down. Brochures appeared in every mailbox, glossy covers with taglines like, "Elevate Your Life." The houses had names: the Aspen, the Marigold, the Summit. Beautiful drawings of glass palaces perched right where I knew the ground would one day crack open. On the back page was Karen herself, arms crossed, chin tilted high, selling a vision of Ridgefield's future. I felt anger, sure, but underneath it was a kind of hollow sadness. I'd seen this story before. Towns betting against nature, thinking they'd outsmart the earth. And the earth always won. I wrote a letter to the city, attached all my evidence, mailed it certified. Weeks passed. Nothing. Meanwhile, Ridgefield Heights broke ground with champagne and ribbon cuttings. The mayor himself stood beside Karen, grinning like a man already counting the tax revenue. I thought I might throw up. I shifted tactics. I wrote an op-ed for the local paper. Fault lines and false promises. I laid everything out, careful, scientific, undeniable. The next day, the HOA sent me a cease and desist. A smug little man named Todd, Vice President of Compliance, as he called himself, handed me the envelope like he was serving the king's decree. Threats of lawsuits, fines, property liens. I told him the earth doesn't care about their lawyers. He didn't laugh. The retaliation piled up. They fined me $500 for distributing fear-based materials when I slipped flyers under car windshields. They barred me from meetings, hired security guards to keep me out. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact. Some whispered thank yous at the grocery store, but others crossed the street to get away from me. I started to wonder if I was wrong. Maybe I was. The crazy old crank shouting about ghosts in the dirt. Nights got longer. I lay awake listening for tremors that weren't there. My mind went back to Paso Robles years ago when my sister Laurel died in a quake. I'd seen the warning signs then too, and I hadn't acted fast enough. She'd been making coffee in a kitchen that split in half. I lost her because I was slow, because I second-guessed myself. That guilt came back with a vengeance. Maybe Ridgefield was my punishment. For a while I thought about giving up. Let them build. Let the ground teach them the hard way. Why should I bleed myself dry when no one listens? But then something happened. A young civil engineer reached out Riley Park. She had been one of Laurel's students decades ago. She told me she remembered my sister, remembered losing her, and she believed me. She offered her expertise for free, said she'd back me up with soil studies and professional testimony. Reading her email was like a light breaking through. For the first time, I wasn't alone. Then, a friend at USGS, Ed Ramos, agreed to look at my data. Within a week, government SUVs rolled into Ridgefield with geologists carrying equipment. Karen tried to block them, lawyer in tow, but the state had signed off. Emergency geological inspection. When the lead geologist said there was significant shallow activity beneath the ridge, Karen's face went pale. She tried to spin it, of course called the report inconclusive, accused me of fear-mongering. But the cracks were showing literally and figuratively. By April, the ridge was humming. My old seismograph needle was twitching nightly, recording swarms of microquakes. I couldn't predict the exact moment, but I knew we were on the edge. Then came the announcement, a grand reveal event for the Marigold, their showcase mansion complete with ribbon-cutting music and champagne. The same house I'd marked years ago as sitting directly on the most active branch of the fault. That morning, the air felt wrong. Too still, like the world was holding its breath. SUVs lined the new roads, music played from hidden speakers, and Karen took the stage in her pristine white blazer, smiling like the queen of Ridgefield. I stood back on the public trail, binoculars in hand. She started speaking, voice loud, confident, proclaiming Ridgefield Heights as the future. And then, at 10:16 a.m., the ground whispered. A low vibration, subtle, but my bones knew it instantly. Birds exploded from the trees, dogs barked. At 10:18, the earth roared. The quake hit like a hammer, first a vertical jolt that buckled pavement, then a savage roll that toppled the stage. Karen went sprawling into folding chairs. Guests screamed high heels, snapping car alarms, shrieking. The driveway split open, swallowing a corner of the valet tent. And then came the Marigold. The glass balcony railings shattered in a glittering wave. The foundation cracked like a gunshot, followed by a deep, grinding roar as the entire rear corner sank into the ridge. Dust erupted, people wailed, someone dropped to their knees. Karen stood frozen, dirt smeared across her blazer, staring at her masterpiece collapsing into rubble. I didn't move. I just gripped a tree heart, pounding, watching it unfold. It was everything I had warned them about, everything they ignored. And now, in front of their cameras and investors, nature had delivered the verdict. Sirens wailed within minutes. Fire trucks, ambulances, sheriff's cruisers. The Marigold was a ruin. The news crews arrived fast, and by nightfall, Karen was on television, bruised and bandaged, insisting this disaster was unforeseen. I nearly threw something at the screen. Unforeseen, I had been screaming warnings for months. The fallout was swift. My reports, my binders, my articles, my recordings, all of it went national. Luxury development built on active fault-line collapses during quake. The headline was everywhere. Lawsuits stacked up buyers, contractors, even injured staff. The state attorney general opened an investigation. The geotech firm lost its license. And Karen Lattimore, Queen of Ridgefield, resigned in disgrace, her photo splashed across the news beside the ruins of her empire. That was where it ended. No celebration, no champagne. Just silence. Broken beams, cracked earth, and the woman who thought she could outsmile the truth, brought down by the very ground beneath her feet. The earth speaks. Listen.